Hi everyone, welcome to PharmaExplora. Today we are going to discuss another important concept in pharmacology, pharmacokinetics. So in our last discussion, we have discussed what is pharmacology. So we define the pharmacology as science of medicine, including its origin, the physical and chemical properties, and also the biochemical effects and physiological mechanisms that particular medicine is going to generate. And we further divided this pharmacology into two main categories, pharmacodynamics and pharmacokinetics. Pharmacodynamics we define as in simple terms, we define as what drug does to the body. And pharmacokinetics we define in simple terms as what body does to the drug. So today we are going to discuss about pharmacokinetics or what body does to the drug. So we will be basically discussing about the theoretical aspects of pharmacokinetics. So we are planning to discuss what is pharmacokinetics, then the contribution of the scientists to develop this discipline, and most importantly, the four main pillars of pharmacokinetics or the ADME framework. This ADME is denoted by the absorption, distribution, metabolism, and elimination. So that is basically the ADME framework. So let's get started. So pharmacokinetics we define as what body does to the drug. So in formal way we can define it as the effect of biological systems on medicine. Effect of biological systems on medicine. So we can say pharmacokinetics So we can say pharmacokinetics as what body does to the drug. What body does to the drug, or more formal way we can define as the effect of biological systems on medicines. So essentially this pharmacokinetics tracks down the movement and the fate of drug molecule from the moment it enters to our body and until it leaves from our body. So the pharmacokinetics tracks down movement and fate. Movement and fate of a drug molecule from the moment it enters to our body until it leaves our body. So this is basically what pharmacokinetics is. So to understand this complex journey of the drug molecule, we use universal framework called ADME. So to understand this complex journey, we use universal framework called ADME. ADME framework. So the ADME framework explains the movement and fate of a drug molecule from the moment it enters to our body and until it leaves from our body. So this ADME stands for absorption, distribution, metabolism, and elimination. So absorption, distribution, metabolism, and elimination. So this is basically what pharmacokinetics is. Okay, now we are going to discuss the ADME framework in detail. So, ADME framework. So, we discussed the pharmacokinetics explain the movement or the fate of a drug molecule from the moment it enters to our body until it leaves the body. So to understand this complex journey, we call that we are using this universal framework called ADME. So this ADME stands for absorption, distribution, metabolism, and elimination. Now we are going to discuss this each for the pharmacokinetic pillar separately in detail. So our first pillar is the absorption. So absorption is the first step of this ADME framework. So absorption we can explain as the absorption, we can say absorption allows or permit to the entry of the drug molecule from the site of its administration to the bloodstream. So the absorption allows the entry of a drug molecule from its site of administration to the bloodstream or the plasma. So entry of a drug molecule. So we can say absorption is the first process which allows entry of a drug molecule from its site of administration to the bloodstream. So we can also say the absorption is the process of movement of a drug molecule from its site of administration to the bloodstream. So that is the very first step of this ADME framework. So then we are going to discuss about the second step, the distribution. So distribution means once this drug molecule goes into the bloodstream, then it will reversibly leaving the bloodstream and enters to the intracellular fluid as well as interstitial fluid. So the second step is the distribution. What happened in the distribution is the drug molecule which enters to the bloodstream reversibly leave the bloodstream and enters to the interstitial fluid compartment as well as intracellular fluid compartment. So these drug molecules will reversibly leave the bloodstream and enter into the interstitial fluid compartment compartment of the body and also intracellular fluid. Intracellular fluid compartment of the body. So this drug molecule will reversibly leaves and enters into the interstitial fluid compartment and intracellular fluid compartment. So now what is this interstitial fluid compartment? Interstitial fluid compartment is the fluid that fills the narrow spaces in between cells. So interstitial fluid compartment is the fluid which fills the narrow spaces in between the cells. Suppose these are cells. This is the interstitial fluid. This is the interstitial fluid. So these are the cells. So interstitial fluid is the fluid which fills the narrow spaces between the cells. And intracellular fluid means what? Intracellular fluid means the fluid inside the cell, cytoplasm. So intracellular fluid means the fluid inside the cell. So now you can see during second step, the drug will reversibly leave the bloodstream and enter into the interstitial fluid compartment, which is the fluid fills in between the cells as well as intracellular fluid. So that is the fluid within the cells. So when drug leaves from the bloodstream, that means when the drug leaves from the, we can say, the capillary, the smallest blood vessel. When a drug leaves from a capillary, which is the smallest blood vessel, it first enters to this interstitial compartment. So then this interstitial fluid compartment acts as a delivery zone or the bridge to enter these drug molecules to the cells, targeted cells. Now, so I can explain it again. Now it's like this. Now the distribution we define as the process of drug reversibly leaves from the bloodstream and enters to the interstitial fluid compartment and intracellular fluid compartment. So the interstitial fluid is the fluid which fills the narrow spaces between cells. So you can see this when the drug molecule leaves from the capillary or the smallest blood vessel, it first enters to the interstitial fluid compartment. So this interstitial fluid compartment acts as the delivery zone for these drug molecules to enter to the fluid, enter to the intracellular fluid compartment. So our drug molecule, first, it here from the site of administration, it will, from the absorption, it will go to the bloodstream. Then it will reversibly go, during the distribution process, it will reversibly go to the interstitial fluid and intracellular fluid. So it will first go to this interstitial fluid, and this interstitial fluid compartment acts as the delivery zone and allowing these drug molecules to move into the intracellular fluid compartment of the targeted cells. So that is the distribution process. Then we are going to discuss about the third step, Metabolism. The metabolism. Metabolism means the process of biotransformation of these drug molecules, making it easier to eliminate or manage. So the process of biotransformation, process of biotransformation of drug molecules to into its metabolites is known as the metabolism. Why our body is doing this? Because these metabolites are easy to manage or easy to eliminate from our body. So the most predominantly this metabolism is doing by our liver, and sometimes it happens in other tissues as well. Then we are going to the fourth step, the final step, the elimination. Elimination, the fourth step or the final step of ADME framework. Eliminate is the drug molecules or its metabolites leaving from our body. So the process of the biotransformed drug molecule, so the drug molecule and its metabolites leaving from our body is known as elimination. So this happens through urine, sometimes through bile, and sometimes through feces. So the elimination is the final step where the drug molecule or its metabolites leaving from our body via the urine, bile, or feces. So this is the overview of ADME framework. So under ADME framework, we discussed four main pillars of pharmacokinetics: absorption, distribution, metabolism, and elimination. Okay, now we are moving to an interesting part of this discussion. Now we are going to discuss about the contribution of the scientists to develop this discipline. So this discipline is not invented by a single person or the single scientist, but this discipline has developed over the years from the contribution of the scientists throughout this period. So today we are going to discuss about three main scientists who significantly contributed to develop this pharmacokinetic discipline. So the first scientist is Torsten Theorel. So he was widely recognized as father of pharmacokinetics. So this scientist Torsten Theorel was widely recognized as father of pharmacokinetics. In 1937, he has published two groundbreaking research papers. Those research papers explain use of mathematical models to describe how drug concentrations change in different compartments of the body. So in his work, he explained using mathematical models how the drug concentrations changes during the time in our body compartments. So this scientist also known as the father of pharmacokinetics, and most importantly, he introduced the concepts of resorption, distribution, consumption, and elimination. This resorption is what we call absorption today. So the term he used, resorption, is what we call absorption today, and the term he used, the consumption, is what we call metabolism today in our ADME framework. So The Torsten Theorel is a scientist who significantly contributed to develop this pharmacokinetic discipline. Then the second scientist comes, Friedrich Hartmut Dost. He was a German pediatrician who published a book entirely dedicated to explain this pharmacokinetics. So he was the first person who formally used this pharmacokinetic term. So he was known as the person who introduced this pharmacokinetic term. So, in his book, he explains the quantitative analysis of the relationship between drug dose and the drug concentration over the time. So, in his book, he explained the quantitative analysis of the relationship of the drug concentration and the drug dose over the time. So, this German the pediatrician also contributed a significant knowledge to this pharmacokinetic field. And the third scientist, E. Nelson. So, E. Nelson is the scientist who organized the specific English acronym of ADME. So, he is the person who went through all this work done by these previous researchers and came up with idea of presenting it into more practical way of using ADME framework, which is using in today's pharmacy schools. So this scientist convert this complex mathematical models introduced by this Torsten Theorel scientist to a more practical pharmaceutical science. So these are the three major scientists who contributed a significant knowledge to develop this pharmacokinetic field. Okay, today in this video we discussed about what is pharmacokinetics into more theoretical aspects. So we discussed what is pharmacokinetics and the significant contribution of scientists to develop this discipline, and most importantly the ADME framework. So in our next session we are planning to discuss about the practical applications of pharmacokinetics, or how this pharmacokinetic knowledge can be used in real world situations. So if you find this video helpful, just hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for our next session. And thank you for joining with PharmaExplora today. See you soon.